So this is a Happy New Year kind of message, which is kind of a funny thing to me because, we say January 1st, so now it's 2016, we've got this whole year, when in reality, it just depends on where you start from. Today's January 10th, a year from now will be January 10th. A year it's 365 days and all that, but it's funny how, like you were talking earlier about the way our minds kind of work, the way we process things, and the way we think of a new year, and so we have new things that we think about and resolutions, all this kind of stuff. Without really thinking, to be honest with you, right now we've never been here before. And you say, yes, we have. We've been in this room. No. It's January 10th, 2016. Every second right now is a second that we haven't lived before. It's always new. There's newness before us all the time. We're the ones that, call days Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So it's another Monday, it's another Tuesday. But in reality, our lives are going by us, and newness is always before us, kind of thing. New years, new days, that kind of thing. All I want to do today, and not take too long doing it, when I was thinking about, if we had met last weekend, I would be sharing this kind of thing last weekend, that yes, every day is a new day, but we can practice certain things that help us as we approach a new day, with certain practices that I think help us to appreciate and live the newness of life that God is giving us every day, whatever situation we find ourselves in. So I've kind of taken John 20 and 21, which is Easter, when Jesus comes out of the tomb. He actually established and birthed the new creation. All things have become new. And we're still trying to come to grips with all that, but there are different things that happen in John 20 and 21, 4 different scenes, that I think lend 4 different, I'll call them spiritual practices, if you would, that every day, if they're part of our lives, help us to live, appreciate, and grow in the newness of life every day. Don't know if that's making a lot of sense to you, but so they're just 4 spiritual practices, let's put it that way, from John 20 and 21. And it appears to me that there's 4 keys, one with each one. So it's going to be 4 practices, 4 keys. Not complicated, things that you listen to and probably say, okay, well. But I'm hoping that if we had a certain resolve in our spirits where we said, yeah, you've lost a ton of weight, maybe not a ton, maybe not 2,000 pounds, but you've lost a lot of weight, a sizable percent of your body mass. And it hasn't been by wishing it or hoping it. You've actually put some things in practice, and you're seeing the results of it as of today. It's the same thing spiritually. We have spiritual practices. These happen to be some personal ones to me, but they are generic. They're not Steve Cerone, they're generic. That if we, I think, practice them, we will see spiritual growth and development in our lives. So, in John 20, the first person, it appears, following the resurrection, that Jesus encounters, talks to, interacts with is Mary. Danielle, would you go to John 20 and read verses 11 through 17? It's a personal encounter. I think that, for all of us, I don't want to say first thing in the morning, but I think we have to have that element of personal encounter. There has to be something of my relationship, my personal relationship with God, with Jesus Christ. There has to be a personal element. The first thing we see in this new creation, this new day, is a personal encounter between Jesus and Mary.
Which verse was it? I'm sorry.
Beginning at verse 11 through 17.
This is the New Living Translation. Mary was standing outside the tomb crying, and as she wept, she stooped and looked in. She saw 2 white-robed angels, one sitting at the head and the other at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had been lying. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" the angels asked her. "Because they have taken away my Lord," she replied, "and I don't know where they have put him." She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" Jesus asked her. "Who are you looking for?" She thought he was the gardener. "Sir," she said, "if you have taken him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go and get him." "Mary," Jesus said. She turned to him and cried out, "Rabboni," which is Hebrew for teacher. "Don't cling to me," Jesus said, "for I haven't yet ascended to the Father. But go find my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God."
Thank you. We spent the better part of the end of last year talking about the table of intimacy, that each one of us decides whether we want to eat at or not, kind of thing. Mark did a good job when he brought the first thought, and then we talked about it a lot. And this tomb scene, we wouldn't necessarily think of as a table of intimacy, but it is. You see a woman who absolutely adores Jesus, and I don't mean in the wrong way, I mean in the right way. And she's at the last place where he was. She's at a place of intimacy, but it's a tomb. We're not going to tear apart the whole passage of Scripture. I just want to say that the first person is Mary. I've got 4 P's here because I think sometimes letters help us. And the P for this first P, as far as I'm concerned, is passion. You can see that Mary is passionate about Jesus. Not about religion, not about anything else. She is passionate. And again, not in the wrong way. When I use words like zealous and jealous, we're not talking about envy, we're talking about jealous. She just absolutely adores and loves Jesus. She's driven, like when David says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me." She's at the all that is within me place. That everything within her is just energized, is alive with Christ because of Jesus. We're basically, when I use the word passion, I'm talking about feelings. So in other words, not the song feelings that we used to play, but feelings where we tend to, it's really tricky because there's been so much even teaching in the church about, you shouldn't be like feelings involved with your, religion and your faith and stuff. And I would beg to differ. I think that the feelings that we have, not the thoughts where we're trying to figure out, we prayed and this person died. I don't think that's helpful in terms of trying to sort it out in our heads intellectually. That our relationship with Jesus, most of it is our feelings. Oh, I shouldn't say most of it. A lot of it is our feelings. The word passion, we use it for the final week of Jesus' ministry, the Passion Week, representing his sufferings. The question has to be asked, why did he suffer? And the answer can only be because he loves us so much. He's so zealous for us. He's so jealous for us, like Paul says, that he went through everything and anything that had to be done to secure our relationship, to restore us, like we're talking about restoration. So we could go on and on about the word passion, but in the practical application, when I say 4 practices, the first key or the first word is passion, that I don't know how we grow spiritually without having a passionate prayer life. And I don't mean a passionate prayer life for answers. I've got my list and I'm going to go down my list, but I'm just passionate to go into my prayer closet, so to speak. Now I recognize that our whole lives are an act of prayer, but passion, pray without ceasing kind of thing. But when Jesus talks about, going into your prayer closet, into that secret place, of having a passion for Jesus, to be with him on a daily basis, to enter into this new day by having a passionate prayer life. It doesn't mean you're going to pray for an hour a day or 2 hours. It doesn't matter what it is, quite frankly. And it doesn't mean a prayer life of going in with a to-do list, but just being me someplace and having a sense of the presence of God in my life, that I could just be me. Cry because I ache because Stephen and Olivia and Amby are back in London. That's prayer. I'm crying out to him, not with words that can be uttered or anything like that, just this emotional thing. And I think that's a wonderful place in our passion for Jesus, if you would. I said that each practice, and I'm going to relatively simple things, passion for Jesus in prayer, there's a key I think that he gives us, Jesus, when he says to Mary, do not cling to me. Now we've talked about this before. We have a tendency to reach back into our memory banks and access the Jesus that we know, so to speak, and bring him into the present and kind of think of Jesus in those terms, the way we read about him in the Gospels and this kind of thing. I'm not saying that's wrong or bad. I would say it's not helpful if you want to move forward, because what you're trying to do is live in the past and bring it into the future, and it doesn't work. That just doesn't work. Now, he says, do not cling to me, and it literally means hold on to me. Do not hold on to the image that I've given you. Don't hold on to me as strictly a Jew with a beard in Palestine 2,000 years ago. You know, when we get to the book of Revelation and Jesus appears to John on the island of Patmos, and John is just like blown away because Jesus appears to be something entirely different than he was used to. That's kind of what we're talking about. There's a bigger, greater, more awesome Jesus. But if we're holding on to, if we're clinging to the old image, we won't be able to recognize him like she didn't. She thought he was the gardener. She didn't recognize him because he never was a gardener. He was a carpenter. But she's holding on to the carpenter. He comes as a gardener. And all of a sudden she realizes, oh my goodness, he's more than a carpenter. Now, we're going to move on, but let me just I'm glad your translation, verse 16, would you read that again?
Mary, Jesus said. She turned to him and cried out, Rabboni, which is Hebrew for teacher.
Now John writes that in there. What does she call him? However you pronounce it, whether you want to say Rabboni, Rabboni. And John puts in there, I think it's parenthetic, is it parenthetically? Which means teacher in Hebrew. What is she doing? She's calling him by what she knew. She's calling him something in Hebrew. And Jesus is saying, don't cling on to me. I'm not Jewish. I was, but I'm not. And I'm not who I was. I am, and I am to come. He was and is to come. So he responds to her saying to him something in Hebrew. He says, don't cling on to that, because you'll never be able to receive me as the God of the Gentiles, of the entire world, of all of creation and everything else. You'll be stuck with your Hebraic, your Hebrew image of me. Don't cling on to that. Now we might say, well, we're not Jewish, but we do the same thing. Somebody who was here last night made the comment, but I was taught this for years and years and years. So now what do you do with something you were taught wrong for years and years and years, and you've been living it out, and it's confused you, and it's hurt you, and it made you cry at night, and now all of a sudden you realize, now what are you going to do? Because you were clinging on to something that you shouldn't have been clinging on to, that the person who gave you that was giving you revelation that they had at that point. I'm not saying it's wrong or bad, but there's a lot more. Anyway, so the first P is passion in prayer, but it's passion for Jesus, not for answers. And I want to stress that. It's great when we get the answers, but it's greater when we get Jesus. This last Christmas, I'm not going to mention names because this is being recorded, and he may not want his name mentioned, but I was with someone who was sharing. This is someone who had committed themselves to atheism for the better part of their life, and has recently renounced atheism because they recognize that there is a designer to this whole thing. And that led into a conversation, me helping the person to see that he's not just like a designer, that he's still actively involved in our lives, if we want him to be. And even if we don't want him to be honest with you, God has a way of showing up and doing what he's going to do because we need him to, whether we like it or not. He's okay with that. But anyway, that led into a conversation of how his mother died, and kneeling at a casket and having no point of reference for anything. All he knew was that his mother was dead. That was reality. He was in a lot of pain, and nobody could do anything about it. And that's just the way it was. And he so wished that he could just have some kind of comfort. He wasn't thinking about God at all. All he wanted was to be comforted. And he felt a comfort in his hopelessness that was beyond trying to figure out here. It was happening here. He was being comforted. Now, as he's telling me this, he's weeping. And he's leaning on me and crying on me. I just put my arm around him. Didn't say anything, because there's nothing to say. It's all about God. You know, well, see, there you go. Now God has revealed himself to you. And if you just pray. No. All I could say was, that sounds like God to me. That's his long suit is comforting us, even if we don't know or care about him, quite frankly. And your desire to be comforted, he met. That's what I mean by a designer who didn't just create the whole thing and then, that's an Epicurean kind of way of thinking, you know, just kind of stepped back and said, now get out, let's see what you guys do with it. It's not like that at all. Anyway, that comforting, those feelings that we get in prayer kind of thing.